Hey, good morning everyone, and welcome to the PivotBoss Pre-Market Report for March 3rd, 2017. I'm Frank Ochoa, aka PivotBoss. Here's a look at the daily time frame of the ES. Right now, we've seen a major push up 2 days prior, and then price came back toward the midpoint of that rally day, came back, closed actually below it. And the expectation was if price starts to push back below 82s, we may start to see this thing start to pull back into 70. Right now we've had a pullback below 76.5. Saw a little box there form in the overnight session, then this thing pops back above it. So right now 76.5 is a key pivot to watch. Obviously we've been in a very bullish uptrending market. It's been a very different type of auction than we've seen recently, but overall it's been very bullish. And right now, you have a very clear pivot here from the previous high here around 23.72. That's the previous high here. That's the overnight low so far. 23.70 is about where the stop started to come out, where this thing really started to rally. So 70 is right back here. So we could still see a little bit more weakness here to the downside. But at some point, we may begin to see rejection on lows and a retest come up. And it's going to be important to see how any pullback is treated by the market, because any rejection could be a major opportunity to fade this back across the range somewhat to establish more of an impulse range high and low so that we can do a little bit more business in this zone. So right now, just kind of looking forward a little bit, but 76.5 is a key pivot, and 72 down to 70, all important levels. If we look at the intraday time frame here, you'll notice right here, there's the 76.5 key pivot, and you can see how price dropped down there this morning, traded a little box here, took VWAP and that 76 bid and rallied back up. So that's a key pivot right now. If price comes into this zone, expect bulls to defend for a shot at pushing price back toward perhaps the pivot range for the day, or maybe as high as the previous session's closing value, which is 23.86. So we could be looking at a decent little bounce up. This would also be the primary upside target for the day, 23.8575, given this low. So if this low remains intact, that would be the upside target. At the moment, obviously, we may be in the midst of a downtrending market, but this is an attempt right now, 76.5, to hold above that zone for a continuation higher. Failure to hold above it rotates this thing back to lows, and again, we could be right into that 76.5 as the next key level below if that 72 doesn't remain intact. All right, looking at crude oil here. Here's crude. One thing with crude right now is we've got a big continuation to the downside. Our expectation here the last couple of days, the beginning of March really, was when we mentioned in our monthly outlook that we have a nice range that's developing here, but we've traded mainly in the upper half of that range over the last week. And so failure to hold above that support zone would indicate a rotation back toward lows. And yesterday was the day where they ran the stops. Look at that low right there and that midpoint right there. Half the day's range was above that low, half the day's range was below it as the stops got run. I call that a 50% stop run day. Very nice push downward. And there could be more downside. So today's one of those days. After you see a big push down, you tend to see a digestion day, or you see bears defending every up higher rotation for a continuation downward. So a digestion day where you look to perhaps fade new highs, fade new lows with a downward bias. So pullbacks, any bounces, likely to be selling opportunities as this thing continues downward toward 51.71. You'll notice here there's been an upward bias here to this range for the most part. All these lows are higher and higher. So when price does get down here into that 51.71 zone, it will be higher than this zone. That may be a time where you finally get to your last target and you may see price return back up toward 54.5 and maybe as high as 55s. So watch for another continuation to the downside and perhaps a bounce back up in crude. If we look at the intraday time frame with that in mind, Again, you'll notice today, after a big sell-off day the previous session, today could be more about digestion. Trading range day, fade new highs, fade new lows. We already have a very clear range up here, 53.20, which we saw in the trading room yesterday is a very, very clear level that bears were just defending hard. Eventually that led to new lows and price closed on lows. So that's the top of the range right now. If there's any rejection of 52.50 here, we may see a move back toward 53.20. That would inspire bears to come back in and push this thing back toward 52.50. So right now, we got to see how much of a range develops. But overall, there's a downward bias. And 53 is the key level. That's a zone. And then, of course, that 53.20, that 53.20, 53.25. Those two are very, very important here. And overall, the trend has been down, and bears are in control of those levels at this time. All right, let's take a look now at gold. Gold is having quite a down move here recently. If we take a look at the intraday time frame, right, let's go higher actually. The higher time frame shows that this thing is pulled back. On the first trading day of March, which was here, I mentioned this was a nice pullback, and if price pulls back into 1144 to 1145, that was a zone to defend for bulls for a shot at 1280. That was the analysis. I mentioned as soon as price fails to hold above 1245, you're likely going to run for new lows, and this thing could see a wider pullback. So again, that's all about the midpoints here. Bulls needed to defend to continue higher. They failed, and this thing pushes downward. And now what we're seeing is this thing from yesterday in the trading room. We mentioned this rejection at the previous week's high, rejection and retest off the previous week's close, a push through the previous week's mid. That all leads to the previous week's low. And that's what we got right now. We saw price react and push through the previous week's low. So having said all that, right now we've seen quite a bearish week here after a bullish advance. The next key level, 1221 to 1220, that's the zone right there where a lot of this action is taking place between bulls and bears. So 1220 right here, very important. Should price get into that zone, it may be another area to look for a rejection back up toward recent highs, as this thing may define a bigger trading range. Any failure to hold 1220 would open up a return back toward the next lowest support level at 1180. Looking at this on an intraday time frame, given the overall downtrending market, selling pullbacks should be the primary idea. Defending LVNs, for example, here's 1230. Any pullback into that area could be a selling opportunity for a push into 1220 and 1221. Above 1230 would open up a retest back toward recent highs at 1236 and perhaps even into 1240. All right, let's take a look now at ZB. Here's a look at ZB. Here's the higher time frame. At the moment, we're right at support and these lows. So there's no rejection that's been seen just yet. Here's recent support. There's the lows. Here's the very smallest low. We just hit a new low, and we're down into that tail. We closed right at the midpoint, so it wasn't really a rejection tail or day, where we opened back near the midpoint and are pushing downward. So this is not looking great for rejection at the moment, but we got to continue to watch to see if some sort of signature develops. Failure to get back above 149.24 would be significant, and that would open up a retest of the next key level below, and that's 147.12. So right now, this thing could build out down here a little bit more, especially if it continues to hold above the previous low. For the most part, otherwise, right now this downtrend remains intact, and this thing could be seeking new lows here very soon if this previous week's low can't remain intact, or the current week's low here. Let's take a look at the intraday time frame. On an intraday basis, with the downtrend intact, again, 149.12 very important, but so is 149.24. I mentioned before, 149.27 is really where price needs to get back above. So I mentioned that we could trade around down here, but as long as we really don't push it much further, to the downside. Otherwise, all of this is building energy for what could be a squeeze back above 149.27. So that's just something we're watching here for signs that this thing is going to start its move back up. For now, it hasn't really shown signs of rejection, still building energy with a downward bias. And so at the moment, pullback's likely to be defended for an attempt at new lows. All right, that's it for now. Let's see how this thing plays out heading into the rest of the session. Good luck, trade well, and happy Friday.